Only minutes after the wagon train travelers celebrated his brother August's wedding, Owen Mason approached the creek, picking his way through the woods so he wouldn't disturb the woman he was seeking. The place in his shoulder where he'd been winged by a bullet pulsed with a dull, never-ending ache. Rachel Duncan knelt on the bank of the little tributary, her hands submerged in the water, suds trailing downstream. As she scrubbed her hands together, he realized she was washing out her dress. She owned exactly 2 dresses, one she wore now that his new sister-in-law, Felicity, had modified to fit her in this late stage of her pregnancy, and the one she was washing, the dress she'd been wearing when she'd been found in the woods over a week ago. He didn't want to know so much about her, how many dresses she owned, that she was restless at night, didn't sleep much thanks to the baby she carried, how she looked when she grieved. No one else seemed to be aware that she was down here while the rest of camp was packed up, folks standing around congratulating August and Felicity on their nuptials. It was only a matter of time before Hollis would blow the bugle, but Rachel seemed to be in no hurry. He stood several yards downstream and half hidden behind a tree. She'd been nothing but trouble since his brother had found her out in the woods. Trouble for Owen, who couldn't stop thinking about her, especially after he'd watched her brother's life leak out between his hands. He hadn't put Daniel on that wagon or forced him to take off from the main caravan. Owen had been shouting for the other man to stop and take cover. When the outlaws had started shooting, Owen had shot back, wanting to scare them off. In the melee, he couldn't be sure whose bullet had hit Daniel, his or one of the outlaws. It didn't matter. Daniel was gone. Maybe that was for the better. The man had been cruel, drowned his grief in a bottle, said things to his sister that no man should ever say to a woman, struck her even. As far as Owen was concerned, good riddance. But once Owen had delivered Daniel's body into the circle of wagons, Rachel had shut down. Gone was the woman who had harangued every family on the wagon train, trying to find a horse or some other transportation to take her back east. Gone was the woman who'd helped every woman who would let her, toting washwater, making supper, watching children. It was as if Rachel had died that day too, and only her shadow remained. She was meek and quiet, barely ate. He noticed her staring blankly into a fire when he woke, and last thing before bed. He wasn't supposed to feel guilt over her situation, but he did, and it made him itchy, and that made him mad. He made his way up the creek bank, now making no effort to hide or quiet his approach. She didn't look up. His temper rumbled like a sleeping dragon, a wisp of smoke on an exhale. Why couldn't the woman do anything the way he might expect? He cleared his throat. When she still didn't look up, he asked, "You doing all right?" She didn't answer him, just kept scrubbing that dress under the water. He'd been close enough to see the fraying hems and an elbow that had already been patched. If she wasn't careful, she'd scrub the thing to threads. Silence reigned for a moment that lengthened into awkwardness, and the dragon that was his temper flared its nostrils, a lick of flame escaping.